Logan, Tristan, and Liliana. Today we are reading Curious George Rides a Bicycle by H.A. Ray. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man in the yellow hat. He was a very good little monkey and always very curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. At breakfast, George's friend said,
"Today we are going to celebrate because just 3 years ago this day I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight I'll take you to the animal show. But first I have a surprise for you."
Breakfast. He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he had always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he had never had one of his own.
"I must go now," said the man, "but I'll be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike and keep close to the house while I'm gone."
There he is, he's just leaving the monkey. There you go. What a cool looking bike, huh? George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both of his hands off the handlebar. There he is on his bike doing a trick. And he could ride this way like a cowboy on a wild bronco. So wild. So bronco. And he could also ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks. Instead, he went out into the street. The newsboy was just passing by with a bag full of papers. "That's a fine bike you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver papers?" He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first, and then turn back and do the other side. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. Look at that kid, he just gave those papers to the monkey on a bicycle. He started to deliver papers on one side of the street as he was told. When he came to the last house, he saw a little river in the distance. George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like, so instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. Look how excited everybody is to get their newspapers delivered by a monkey. And there in the back is the river. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from the bridge. A duck family was paddling downstream, and two boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and look at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered the papers. So he rode on. That is the kid who asked George to deliver the papers and help him. While riding along, George kept thinking of all the boats. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought, and then he had an idea. He got off the bicycle and took a newspaper out of the bag and began to fold it. First, he folded down the corners. Like that. You see those down there? It's a froggy. What are those? Fish. And that? What's that called? It's called a cattail. Then he folded both edges up, and then he folded the ends together, and he flattened it sideways. Then he turned it up, then on the other one, again, he brought the ends together, flattened it sideways, gently pulled the ends open, and then he had a boat. Look, instructions. and make your own boat. You could make your own boat if you wanted to. Just follow those instructions. Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? And it did. It did. So George decided to make some more boats. Finally, he used up all the papers and had made so many boats that he could not count them. A whole fleet. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. Look at all those newspapers. And ducks. Lots and lots of ducks. Those ducks are playing. Lots of ducks. Looks like there's a cricket in there. A butterfly there. Do you see any other animals? I see a frog. Mostly ducks. And he's not looking. What's he gonna run into? Suddenly, there was a terrible jolt. The bicycle hit a rock, and George flew off the seat, head first. Luckily, George was not hurt, but the front wheel of his bicycle was all out of shape, and the tire was blown out. That's sad. George tried to ride the bicycle, but of course it would not go. So he started carrying it, but it's too heavy. George did not know what to do. His new bike was spoiled, the newspapers were gone, he wished he had listened to his friend and kept close to the house, and now he just stood there and cried. There he is trying to ride it. There he is trying to carry it. There he is, rather destitute, very upset. Very sad. Suddenly, his face brightened. Why, he had forgotten that he could ride on one wheel. He tried it and it worked. He hardly started out again when he saw something. What did he see? He got one wheel going, so he may figure out a way to ride it, but he saw something. What is that? Looks like a butterfly. No, he had never seen this before. Rolling towards him came an enormous tractor with huge trailers behind it. Looking out of the trailers were all sorts of animals. To George, it looked like a zoo on wheels. The tractor stopped. And I wonder if this is related to that show the man with the yellow hat was going to take him to. And men jumped out. Well, well, said one of the men. A little monkey who can ride a bike. Bronco fashion. We can use you in our animal show. Tonight, I am the director of the show, and this is Bob. He can straighten your wheel and fix that flat tire in no time. And then we'll take you along to the places where the show is going to be. So, the three of them got into the cab and drove off. Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show, the director said. I have a bugle for you just right here, and later on you get a green coat and a cap just like Bob's. There's the man hanging out with George, and that man fixing the bicycle. Yeah, look, it's like a circus. What a good show. Maybe one of the greatest shows. Man. On the show grounds, everybody was busy getting things ready for the show. I must do some work now, said the director. Meanwhile, you may have a look around and get acquainted with all the animals, but you must not feed them, especially the ostrich. He will eat anything and might get very sick afterwards. Look at all those critters. There's a hippo. There's the ostrich. And look at all those cool things. Do you see the giraffe? Can you see the giraffe? Look how tall he is. Oh, wow. Lots of animals. George was curious. Would the ostrich really eat anything? He wouldn't eat a bugle, or would he? George went a little bit closer to the cage, and before he knew it, the ostrich had snatched the bugle and tried to swallow it. But the bugle is hard to swallow, even for an ostrich. It got stuck in his throat. Funny sounds came out of that bugle, and the ostrich was struggling with it. All blue in the face, George was frightened. There he is, visiting the ostrich, and there he is, trying to feed the ostrich, and there the ostrich is being choked
by a bugle, because George didn't listen. Fortunately, the men heard the noise. They came rushing to the cage and got the bugle out of the ostrich's throat just in time. The director was very angry with George. "We cannot use little monkeys who do not do as they are told," he said. "Of course, you cannot take part in the show now. We will have to send you home." George had to sit on the bench all by himself, and nobody even looked at him. He was terribly sorry for what he had done, but now it was too late. He had spoiled everything. There's George, sitting down on the bench because he couldn't listen. Meanwhile, the ostrich, always hungry, had gotten a hold of a string dangling near his cage. This happened to be the string that held the door to the cage of the baby bear. As the ostrich nibbled at the door, it opened, and the baby bear got out. He ran as fast as he could and made it straight for the high tree near camp. Nobody had seen it but George. And George was not supposed to leave his bench. But this was an emergency, so he jumped up and grabbed the bugle and blew as loud as he could. Then he rushed to his bicycle. The men had heard the alarm and thought at first that George had been naughty again. But when they had saw the empty cage and the ostrich nibbling on the string, they knew what happened. There's the ostrich causing trouble, and there's the George trying to alert everybody to that little bear. Look how cute that bear is. He's just running off into the distance for the nearest tree. George raced towards the tree far ahead of the men. By now, the bear had climbed quite high, and this was dangerous because little bears can climb up trees easily, but coming down, much harder. They may fall and get hurt. The men were worried they did not know how to get him down safely, but George had a plan. With a bag over his shoulder, he went up to the tree as fast as he could, as fast as a monkey can. And when he reached the baby bear, he put the bear in the bag and carefully let him down so that the men could safely catch him. Look at that. Good job, George. Everybody cheered when George had come down from the tree. "You are a brave little monkey," said the director. "You saved the baby bear's life. Now you'll get your coat back, and of course you may ride your bike and play the bugle in the show." Look at that. He doesn't do what he's told, but he does do the right thing when it needs to happen. What a good George. Finally, the show was on, and how surprised they were right in the middle of it. And also the whole town had come to see it, to discover George on his bike. The newsboys were there too, with the yellow hat. Everybody was there. Look at all the animals. There's the director, an elephant. What's sitting on that ostrich? There's the man in the yellow hat, the little boy. So many people. The man in the yellow hat had been looking for George everywhere and was happy to find him at last. The newsboy was glad to have his bag again, and the people from the other side of the street whose papers George made in the boats were not angry with him anymore. When the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap with the bugle, and George and his friends got into the car and left. Where did they go? They went home. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I enjoyed reading it to you. I look forward to reading the next story tomorrow, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye.